Hello, everybody, and today we have a pretty good day, I would say so myself. So, getting right into it is stat wise. Obviously, it was mainly Brett Hundley out there today. So, you have him going 18 of 33 for 157 yards, a 4.8 average yards per attempt, one touchdown, three picks, four sacks, 20 yards or lost on those sacks. You have a 9.5 QBR for Brett Hundley with a 39.6 rating. And then Rodgers was 204 for 18 for 4.5 yards on his average. Zero touchdowns, zero picks. He had a 56.6 rating and a 62.5. So if you add all this up together, they are 20 of 37 of 155 minus the 20. So we're talking 135 in terms of yards actually allowed by the Minnesota Vikings defense. And then you have 4.7 yards are their average, and obviously the touchdown and the pick and the three picks are all from Hundley, since Rodgers didn't throw any one of those. And then you have a rating of all combined rating of 42.1 for Hundley and Rodgers. And then going on to their running game, Aaron Jones was their leading rusher with 13 carries for 41 yards, a 3.2 average, no touchdowns, and a long of 9. Then you have Ty Montgomery coming in at 10 carries for 28 yards, a 2.8 yards per carry average, no touchdowns, and a long of 7. And Hundley carried it once for 3 yards, and so that's 24 carries for 72 yards. And judging that we were in nickel for most, if not all of the game, it was kind of impressive. So, and then we come over to the receiving game, which I thought was really interesting because we had Devontae Adams being shadowed by none other than Xavier Rhodes for a pretty decent chunk of the game. And I thought maybe Trey Waynes on Nelson wouldn't be that good, but maybe just because he's slower than Adams, maybe we're kind of like, okay, Wayne, since you struggle covering the deep balls, maybe it goes out to, him to cover some of these slower guys now, even though that makes almost no sense, judging that he's ran a 4.31 at the combine. But going into the stats, Nelson was the leading receiver with 6 receptions for 60 yards and no touchdowns with a long of 26 on 10 targets. Adams was 5 receptions for 54 yards, also on 10 targets. Cobb only had 3 targets, but caught all of them for 28 yards. And then Martellus Bennett caught 2 of his 4 targets for 22 yards. And those are some of the bigger names out there. And then going to our guys, who I think had a pretty solid game for the most part. Obviously, we won. You had Keenum going 24 of 38. He had 239 yards, a 6.3 average, a touch, and a pick. He was not sacked once. The line played pretty well today for the most part, I think. And then you have the QBRs and ratings of 64.3 and 78.7 for Mr. Case Keenum. And so going on to the running game, you had McKinnon going for 16 carries, 69 yards, a 4.3 average, a touchdown, and a long of 20. So not a bad day for McKinnon. Murray, on the other hand, he still struggling a bit, just a bit. And he had 15 carries for 28 yards. That equals a 1.9 yards per carry average. And then a 10 was his long. So, and then Keenum carried it twice, although albeit one of them was for a kneel down. And so he had a long of 16 but 15 yards, and that equals 33 carries for 112 yards at 3.4 yards per carry average, and a touchdown, and obviously McKinnon's long was 20. So, and then you go over to the receiving game. Thielen had 9 catches for 97 yards, a 10.8 average, and he had 13 targets. Treadwell, of all people, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 51 yards and a long of 25, and that one-handed catch was one beautiful thing. And then you have Rudolph sitting there with 5 catches for 47 yards and 9.4 yards per catch average. And then he had 9 targets. So I think Rudolph played his solid game that he normally does. That's nothing that's abnormal for Kyle. He's usually like that, unless it's like you'll occasionally see the red zone touchdown with him, as he is the red zone reindeer. And then you have McKinnon. He had 5 receptions for 30 yards and that touchdown on the screen pass. And he also had another long screen pass that was called back because of an ineligible lineman down the field, which was a Pat Elflein. Murray had 1 catch for 9 yards. Floyd had 1 catch for 5 yards on 3 targets, and then Coley had a target. So that's the things I would like to talk about first, though. Now that we gotten all the statistical stuff out of the way. The hit on Rodgers, I think, was actually kind of a legal hit. I know people are gonna say, "Oh, you're just a biased Viking fan." Well, he was out of the pocket. They are not granted total protection no matter where they go. So I think we've seen that play several times. We've seen several quarterbacks break their collarbone on that play, and it hasn't been called all the time. So I think that's more of it could have gone either way, and you can't really argue which way it goes because if it goes one way, you won't be able. It's just been called that way so many times, like for both ways, that you can't say, oh, it's definitely illegal or definitely legal. I think you have to go with whatever the refs say, and that's pretty much it on that hit. And that's what I think. The other thing I want to talk about is McKinnon, although he had 99 total yards of offense today. The fumbles are becoming an issue, I think. So we need to cut down on the turnovers and the fumbles. So and I think that's part of it. McKinnon needs to hold on to the ball. And then another thing I really wanted to get up to is Treadwell. Is this a aberration or is this Treadwell? And I want to see this Treadwell a lot more because we saw kind of the nastiness and the grit that we thought we were going to get from a Laquan Treadwell when we drafted him number 23 overall back in 2016. But we haven't seen that till today, really. So just having that physical, that nastiness, that grit, all the chip on his shoulder, that's what we thought we were getting. And with Floyd only getting 5 yards, although he did have a target to him that was a tipped ball intercepted by, I think it was, I forget who, I think it was Demarius Randall who picked it off ultimately. But I'm pretty sure Jake Ryan was the one that tipped it up. And so that could have had a pretty decent gain on it, although, because it looked like Keenum was trying to look away the safety, and then he just didn't see the linebacker in the throwing line. But I digress. The point is this Treadwell being Treadwell, and this is what we can possibly expect, maybe? Because he had a 17-yard average on his catches. So it wasn't like these dinking and dunking things. He was running down the field and making contested catches, and he had that one really good route on that 18-yard catch. So I'm just wondering, do you think this is Treadwell or more just Diggs was out so he got the opportunities and it was a weak defense? So, and then Floyd, should we be concerned about Floyd? He was one of the bigger offseason additions in my mind. I thought he might be pretty good to have just because he's a deep threat. And he only had 1 catch for 5 yards. So I'm starting to wonder, is this really just Treadwell's job, and this is, Diggs stealing Treadwell, and not so much Michael Floyd, because we have Rudolph and McKinnon also contributing to the passing game. So it's just a little interesting. And then Latavius needs to step up. 1.9 yards per carry is not going to get it done. We cannot have that. We only have 2 backs on the roster if you're not including C.J. Ham as a running back. And even then, C.J. Ham is not really one that would fit as a tailback in this system now. I don't think Murray is a back that fits in this system now because you have a power scheme running back running in this zone scheme. He does not have the hips to be in his own scheme. So I think what you could look at here, if you're really thinking outside the box, like you could think like, oh, we could just sign another running back. Like one thing I was thinking of, although how unlikely this is, Shane Vereen's getting a little out in New York. So Jarius Wright is nowhere to be found. They have no receivers currently. So if we could ship over Jarius Wright for Shane Vereen, I think that would be a pretty good deal on both sides. But if we're just gonna stick with Latavius, 25 needs to show up because he can look as intimidating as you want him to be, but if he's not producing, what good is it? So we need him to kind of up the ante a little bit. And then turnovers, flags, those penalties, Like, we need to cut down. We had 2 turnovers today, and we barely won the turnover battle, and we had 3 turnovers, so we were +1 this game. When you have 3 turnovers, you shouldn't be +1. That's kind of sad. So we need to cut down on the turnovers, and then the flags. Like, I felt like that one drive where Treadwell had the block. As much as I liked the block, just because it showed kind of how much Treadwell wanted to be in the game. Like, he felt more in the game this time around, because even if you're talking about just him running down the sideline on Jarek's fumble, and then Clay Matthews was returning it all the way down, he caused a fumble on Clay Matthews on that play. So I think this is kind of what we thought we might be getting with him, and I'm really hoping that stays. But the flags need to go, because on that drive where he did have that block that was called, ultimately, after a various number of flags, it became 1st and 40. We cannot have 1st and 40. So, and then speaking of that same drive, clock management was not the best right there. It felt like you were on their 30, and I know it would have been a pretty long field goal, especially for Kai Forbath from that point, for the most part. But it we came away with nothing on that drive, and that was kind of not good. That was really not good. So I think clock management should have been handled a little better, as I forget how much time exactly is on the clock, but I feel like it was a little bit under a minute. I thought it was like 48 seconds, something like that, 48, 50 seconds. And we had 3 timeouts, and we just let the clock bleed out, and then we had to try a Hail Mary, which Case Keenum got there, which I didn't know if he could get it there. Because at that point, like, when it was all said and done, we were at like our own 45. So the fact that he was even able to get it there, I thought was pretty good. Thielen almost caught it, but and then so I think looking for a possible third back though for Latavius could be a thing, whether it's a D'Angelo Williams or a Ryan Matthews, or trying to trade for a guy, or whatever it may be. I think we need to try to find a third back, because honestly, like, the fact that we're running with 2, I don't think is the best idea. Because if McKinnon goes down, we have no one to replace McKinnon. We don't have anyone of that kind of breed of skill set. So, which I think is more important than trying to replace Latavius Murray, because Latavius is pretty much phased out. It's pretty much like, it's 70-30, I think, right now. Like, even though the carries don't say it, I think production-wise, you have to stay like, okay, McKinnon, you're getting most of the carries now. So, although he did get 21 touches today. So I think for the most part, we're looking at, we may need to get a third back. And first place, we're in first place because we have the tiebreaker now over Green Bay, and Detroit lost today in a wild and crazy game down in New Orleans. So I don't know how I feel about the first place, just because we don't know how the quarterback situation is. And speaking of quarterback situation, we're talking about Teddy B coming back. And I'm not entirely sure if Teddy Bridgewater will not play this week. I know that for sure. But I don't know when we will see him. He will be probably activated to the roster at some point within the next 2 weeks. But I don't expect him to play week 7 against the Baltimore Ravens, because that's a decent defense. Even though he can be activated this week, I don't think he can practice till like Wednesday, and that doesn't sound like a good idea to start that guy against that, like, 1 week after coming back from an injury that almost amputated his leg. That seems a little extreme, doesn't it? So, and then while we're on quarterback topics, might be time to extend Case Keenum. As crazy as that sounds, I wasn't thinking anything too crazy. I was thinking probably like a 10-year, $10 million deal. No, 2-year, $10 million deal. But like, with not much guaranteed, probably talking 3 to 5 million guaranteed total in that thing, where the second year is just not really a thing, as most contracts are these days. So, my overall view of this game is we did what we were supposed to, assuming, well, taking the fact that Aaron Rodgers did not play in the game, essentially. So I think we did what we were supposed to for the most part, although we had some sloppiness and let them come back into the game a bit. We need to fix up on that. And outside of that, if we can just keep surviving with Case Keenum, I think we're good until either Sam or Teddy gets back. and the fact that we're 4-2 is kind of a miracle. But I would like to know your comments about this game, whether it be the bar hit or anything that happened in the game. Comment that down below. I please like, subscribe as well, and farewell.